So Wampum Press starts in a Taco Bell in...
No.
Yeah.
It was Burger King.
It was not Burger King.
It was absolutely Burger King with their breakfast menu.
Was that in Telequa?
Yeah.
Oh, Taco Bell was later. You're right. How embarrassing. And Lynette.
Yeah, the
lovely
gorgeous Lynette.
who commented on my nails and asked me if they were acrylic.
And
That's right.
yeah, she was such a bright sunshine, ray of
Yeah,
sunshine.
she was a treat.
Hi, I'm Michael Earp.
And I'm Bailey Turner,
Welcome to Michael's Walk.
the podcast.
Michael's Walk is a road trip, a search for something. Spoilers, it's myself, and it was inside all along.
If only it were that simple.
Driven by Tori Amos's album, Scarlett's Walk, I'm recreating the journey Scarlett took in its 20th anniversary year.
I'll also be there.
With the loving and patient
Always patient.
support of Bailey and Teague Lee, 3 trans queers set out across America
That's 33 states in 55 days.
to connect with the songs, the land that inspired them, and the fans inspired by the songs. We'll talk music, travel, healing, and hope as we ask the questions: how do I heal from 15 years of coercive control and manipulation?
And what role does the music we listen to play in our own relationship narratives?
We've self-produced this podcast and trip.
You can support us via GoFundMe.
For the full story, head to michaelerp.net. Yeah, so our trip on the Wampum Pair... So Wampum Pair on the map is actually quite lengthy. It stretches all the way from Tucson, right through Tucson, Arizona, right through New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, down through Missouri, and then at around Telequa changes into Don't Make Me Come to Vegas. But obviously, for our part of our journey, it was the changeover at Telequa up to Kansas City.
And a lot of people got confused because we were in St. Louis, which is like a 4-hour drive to Kansas City, but
Instead, we decided to fly to Dallas and then do a 12-hour drive up to...
everyone was so
Kansas City.
bamboozled by it. But it was the only... When we were plotting this out, we were like, we could do it this way, and we're like, well, we cannot miss any girls, even if we only have them for a day.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the situation here where we tried to get as much as we could in the day to connect with these songs.
And so this little strip was stopping at 2 different creeks and, again, putting our feet in the water to just connect.
We also made a decision, which I'm really, really pleased about, where instead of taking the highways up to Kansas City, we took sort of the off-roads, which really only cost us about 10 minutes max, but made such a difference to be able to see more and have a more intimate connection. We went on sort of a bare road. We were like right in the thick of the sort of the forests.
Well, we wouldn't have got either of those streams had we not.
That's right.
And they were both great, even though one hurt our feet a lot.
The rocks were painful, okay?
Yeah, just a baby.
They're just a baby. Nah, that shit hurt. I was in so much pain.
But I loved the style. Like, my goodness, there was just all these families literally sitting on camping chairs in the river.
It was so hot.
It was so hot.
So I can't blame them.
And just, they had their country music playing from the back of their utes, or pickup trucks, as they're called over here.
Getting out their blowies or their blow-ups. Getting their blow-ups and filling them with ice and floating down the river going tubing.
Oh, so much.
So many tubing.
Seen tubing everywhere through Oklahoma and Missouri.
But look, I would say that, you know, having these beautiful reservations flooded with white people paying money to jump in an inner tube and spill beer in the creeks, I felt was a very pertinent reference point for Wampum Prayer.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is... Tori talks about, you know, the connection she made to Indigenous people when a voice kind of called to her as she was traveling through Cherokee territory, which is the Native American people that Tori descends from in part.
Yeah.
And spoke to her about the massacres that happened there, and that's what she kind of follows.
Because it's so short, I will just read the entire.
We'll let's have the prayer.
In our hand, an old, old thread, trail of blood and amens. Greed is the gift for the sons of sons. Hear this prayer of the Wampum. This is the tie that will bind us.
You actually looked into the meaning of wampum.
Yeah, I will admit that for most of my life, I have had no idea what wampum was or meant, and
well, bear in mind that we weren't even taught about our own Indigenous history in school, let alone the Indigenous relations of other countries.
I will admit that I had always assumed it was a tribe of people.
As had I, yeah.
I had thought that it was like saying Cherokee prayer, but it turns out that the wampum are actually the precious beads made out of shells, quite often kept on a thread or a chain, a necklace. They were sometimes used as money or to seal a deal when a trade is done. And so I believe, I think some native title lands were sold to colonizers. I'm using inverted commas a lot here, using wampum. And so it's actually a much more broader and spiritual thing than just simply being a specific land.
But it makes so much more sense knowing what the sort of, with greed being the gift, like that was, beads were how Manhattan got started.
Yeah.
The bead markets in New York were the beginning of the great, and powerful New York City. So, it really had, the trading of wampum has evolved and been weaponized into the commerce, system, and the corrupt system that we know today.
And chains of them were sometimes used as prayer beads or prayer chains in the same way that, Catholics use rosary. So to have it be called the wampum prayer and be about the ties that bind us, because when you make a trade, that chain wraps around both of you. I think it's a really powerful song.
Yeah. We've heard a number of stories as well and seen, as we were driving through, a lot of these places, how famous the Indian casino became. And we were having a discussion with the Krabby Apples about, I think it was no, it wasn't the Krabby Apples. It was the people we stayed with in Albuquerque.
Oh, right.
Talking about the Grand Canyon and how there have been multiple attempts by developers to create, put a McDonald's and put a sky rail in and create a shopping center in the bottom of the Grand Canyon and apartments. And every time they kind of approach, they bring people from various tribes across the area who are interested in, because they've been manipulated by the money, and the possible financial impact. And we were reading about this as well at the Arch in St. Louis about how many
one person's opinion, the white people took as speaking for the entire tribe.
So all you really needed was one person.
To convince one person and pay them off enough.
And they didn't even necessarily have to be from that tribe. They just had to say they were for the colonizer's purpose. These people, they've said that's where they're from because there's no paperwork, which is what, the cruel language that white people speak in, identification documents and all this crap. So it was, bamboozling that, greed has bound up everybody. And has toxified all humans, in that sense. And I think what I love about this is it's a prayer, but it's also a curse. I think one of the best things I've ever read about curses is that curses are never something that an evil witch puts on a person. It's something that a person weaves upon themselves by behaving in a way that is immoral or cruel. And that's, and that's kind of what real life curses are. And this is really an example of that, because of the way that white people have treated, the native people of these beautiful countries. They've cursed themselves with greed and with the need for comfort, like the amount of money that people have and the amassing of wealth isn't making anyone happy and isn't creating a safe environment. Like, it is destroying a human's ability the human's ability to survive. I can't remember who I was talking to about. She was a guy I met in Denver who was talking about, destroying nature. And we were talking about Chernobyl. And I was like, well, this is the thing, like, nature's going to be fine. Nature isn't being destroyed. Nature will endure long past us. We're not destroying nature. We're destroying our ability to live
on this planet.
Because ultimately what we've forgotten is that we actually need this planet to survive. Electricity and technology don't actually keep us alive. They're not essential to human existence at all. But proper greenery and sunlight and oxygen all are. Yeah, we are. This is the curse upon humankind, and time and nature have no concept. Nature has no concept of time, and it doesn't matter how long it takes for this curse to see itself out. But at the end of the day, the people who are going to endure through things like global warming are First Nations people, because they will know how to adapt, and they will be working in sync with nature. And the sooner that we turn to and support and
empower,
and allow ourselves to be led by First Nations people, the better off we'll be in the long run. But what that will require is a humility that I don't know if the world will ever be able to possess.
Yes.
I think you put it really well. We've written there, like, our futures are tied.
Yeah. That's true.
And we've only hurt ourselves. We've only hurt
Well,
ourselves.
that kind of, it leads into my advice my interpretation of this song is to be mindful of the land that you're on and don't forget the history of it, because when you erase the history, it only leads to making the same mistakes again and again.
I mean, it was the same, respect Indigenous culture. My advice was pay the rent, Virginia. Actually don't just know, but work, because ultimately I would say it's key to joy is feeling connected to land, and the best people to teach you how to do that are Indigenous cultures. So find out that information. You can book cultural meetings in, you can tour your local area, you can visit sites, and there's so much you can do that we often don't, just for the sake of conveniences and comforts. I think we're all very aware. I mean, I hope everyone who's listening to this playlist, I'm sure, can understand that we're out of time. So, we don't really have the luxuries. There will be no more Sons of Suns. And I think the other thing was, my advice to Virginia is to be clear on what it is that makes you legitimately happy. This conversation that we had about this song brought up conversations I've had with my father, encouraging me to buy land and have property and have a stable job and, all these things that I had to tell him one day, none of those things make me happy. I want stories and experiences and relationships, and, massive amounts of debt and occupation of land are not going to give me any of those things. They are not markers of success for me at all. They are not markers of happiness. And I would encourage everyone to really assess that for themselves, what it is that actually makes you happy outside of owning things. It's that beautiful Pocahontas quote. You can own the land and still, you can own the earth and still all you'll own is earth until you can paint with the colours of the wind.
Yes. So the song swap was interesting for this one because it's so clear in its intent that to then draw parallels with other songs, we had to make sure that we weren't distorting the message.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I couldn't even think of anything really. But then I had a few come into my brain. One was a song called Couldn't Hear Nobody Pray. I think it's a traditional gospel song, but the version that I know is performed by Suzy and Maggie Roche, two of the Roche sisters. They have a band with their third sister called the Roches, and they're great folky sort of trio, and they did a side project called Zero Church, which was supposed to be a collection of non-denominational prayers, and the opening track is this gorgeous gospel Couldn't Hear Nobody Pray, and so that came to mind. Then also, not that it's terribly like Wampum prayer in its meaning or anything, but the final line in Wampum prayer really brought to mind a line from a Joanna Newsom song, which is probably my favourite Joanna Newsom song, called Emily. It's a gorgeous, epic 12.5-minute song on her album Wise. But in it there's a line that says, "The ties that bind, they are barbed and spined and hold us close forever." And that has always hit home with me because of feeling so ensnared in my past relationship. I was like, well, yeah, here we are, we're bound together, but my goodness, there are barbs. And then the last one that popped into my head was Native Tongue by Moju.
Mojo Juju, yeah.
Yeah, I think their artist name now is just Moju.
Oh, cool.
But it's very much them coming to terms with their mixed race heritage and not really feeling like they have a connection to culture, even though they're living in Australia and have Indigenous heritage. So they also have Filipino heritage, but they can't speak Filipino, and so that's what native tongue is about. Like, when you can't speak either of your supposed native languages, how can you connect with culture?
Yeah. There's a piece that I'm writing for Through the Violets. It's one of the sort of pieces that got finished almost before I came here, and I'm really excited to revisit it. I wrote it years and years and years ago after seeing a really great exhibition by an artist of colour named Ruth. And it was about being from an ethnic culture that was very much a part of the assimilation movement, you know, that's what Italians and Greeks did a lot of, and sort of talking about how I was emptied by my ancestors, and, you know, how do I, you know, am I appropriating even my own culture because I don't have a genuine connection to being Italian? You know, I didn't speak it. I cook it vaguely, you know, like, but I've never been there. Like, I've never visited there. Like, it's just how do I reclaim that? How do I claim that to begin with?
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to read that one.
The songs that I picked, one is called "Mountains Are Things" by Tracy Chapman. I've listened to Tracy.
Your Anne Brun of the season.
Yes, she is. And there's a Tracy Chapman song for every occasion. I am amazed I haven't used her more. The other artists I can't believe I haven't used at all yet, but I know that they're coming as Muna.
Oh, yes.
So my favourite band. But Mountains Are Things is a song about, you know, basically accumulating wealth, and you know, she's singing from, you know, Tracy has always sung about incredibly about social injustice and, you know, divides in wealth, the sort of haves and have-nots, and racism and all these things. And so this song is from the perspective of someone who is wealthy. And I'll read some of the lyrics. In the bridge, it's, "Mostly I feel lonely. Good people are only my stepping stones. It's going to take all my mountains of things to surround me. keep all my enemies away, keep my sadness and loneliness at bay. And like it's just a song that occurred to me as I absolutely spoke to that experience, that, you know, what the sons are feeling now.
Yeah.
And the other one that sprung to mind was a song called Treaty by Yothu Yindi. This kind of was one of the first songs that I ever remember hearing that had Indigenous language in it. It was, you know, one of the first, you know, Yothu Yindi were one of the first ever, you know, Aboriginal bands that got
on
radio airplay.
Yeah.
You know, like they actually, and it was kind of because the song was like a remix. It, you know, it's a bop. That's the reality. It's a bop, but speaks about relationship to country. And I read a few lyrics of this one too. Words are easy, words are cheap, much cheaper than our priceless land, but promises can disappear, just like writing in the sand. Treaty, yeah, treaty now. And this has always been about the fact that there was never a treaty written between colonisers and the Aboriginal people. They never surrendered their sovereignty, and it's an ongoing issue now that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are still looking for a treaty between the Australian government and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to the degree where there is an Aboriginal embassy in Australia's capital that sort of exists to continue to fight this agenda of, you know, some kind of union in leadership. You know, reading up on the facts about Australia's relationship to its Indigenous cultures, you know, we are considered as bad as America in the mistreatment and in the massacres and the atrocities and the ongoing social divide that exists.
Indigenous deaths in custody.
Yep. Lack of education, homelessness, substance issues. I remember finding out recently that there's a program in a part of, I think it's the Kimberley, where like they put in like a recreation program that was only for young offenders. So they built this site for young offenders to have their parole meetings and to, you know, get counselling, and it's air conditioned, and there's a PlayStation in there, and like it's a place for them to go, but they can only go if they're young offenders. So you are creating, like, a kid's gonna sit outside when it's like, oh, all I need to do is hold up a petrol station, or, you know, and then I'll get access to this resource. And there's another one where there's a counselling service that was put in a remote community, and it's funded by the coroner. It's not funded by Indigenous Affairs or funded by Health, it's funded by the coroner. And it only exists in response to the amount of Indigenous suicides in the area.
Oh my goodness.
So like, if Indigenous suicides stop, then the counselling will be withdrawn, because that's the you know, like, this is how systemic and how insidious it is. So, you know, there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot to be done with whatever time we have left to make not just, you know, financial reparations,
but everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
The Wampum prayer. Well, thank you for joining us again for that episode. We look forward to discussing carbon, where...
Oh, not yet. Don't jump ahead of the patch.
Whoops. My bad.
We will actually... So we made a decision about a half hour ago that because Michael didn't get to join, it's the only song that Michael has missed, which is Sweet Sangria, which travels from San Antonio to Houston in Texas, which Teague and I got to do. And we talked about experiences in each of those spots little by little here and there, but so we decided to put Sweet Sangria, sort of shoehorn her in between Wampum Prayer and Carbon as a way to make up for make up that one being lost for Michael.
But we also get to interview the fantastic Michael Gillies, Mike Light on Instagram, who has lots to share about that. And then I also have a short snippet taken from the interview with Alexander Legesmore, which will be great to share as part of that episode as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a hoot. We'll see you then.
We'll see you then.
The Michael's Walk podcast acknowledges that the journey they are undertaking takes place on the sacred and unceded nations of many proud Indigenous peoples. From the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, we are fortunate to call home, to each and every Native American tribe's land we'll set foot on as we travel. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and humbly acknowledge their sovereignty.